video, I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. And I'm going to be talking about the OPS types that are the most and least like their corresponding MBTI type. So, like, there are 32 kinds of ISTJs in OPS land. But which variant of ISTJ is the most like the counterpart ISTJ in MBTI land? Which one is the least like the ISTJ? And so on for these other types. Now, this video is just kind of for fun. It's not to be taken too seriously, but it's just my own thoughts about this. So how this works is I'm using a 12-point system. So first of all, there's 3 points for being the standard version of the type and not a jumper. This is pretty important because if you're a standard version of your type, your savior functions are the top 2 functions in that function stack. So I think that's pretty significant there, because if you're a jumper, you don't look as much like the standard version because you're using the 3rd function as a savior rather than the 2nd function. 3 points for the 1st function being double activated, because if it's double activated, it looks like it's getting more use. So, in other words, non-glass lizard types. If you're a glass lizard type, when you have the bottom function double activated, you don't look as much like a typical version. You look like some other type. 1 point for having the 1st function in the top 2 animals, because those top 2 animals are what we call the savior animals. So, for example, if you compare an ISTJ, just a standard SITE variety ISTJ, that's blast sleep versus one that's blast play. The blast sleep one looks a little more like a typical ISTJ, because if it's blast sleep, that SI is in the first 2 animals. But if it's a blast play ISTJ, they're getting activation from SI in blast, but play doesn't have activated SI. That one's got activated NE instead, which kind of counteracts what we consider typical ISTJ. 2 points if the 2nd function is double activated. This doesn't carry quite as much weight as the 1st function, because, in MBTI land, the real essence of that type is primarily from the 1st function, and then the 2nd function is kind of like the support. So that one is 2 points. 2 points if the 1st function in the stack is masculine, because if it's masculine, they're shoving on it more. So you're going to notice its presence more. It's going to appear more intense. Now, there is one exception to this rule. I know, those pesky exceptions, but it's got to be said here. That exception is FE. FE is reverse scored. So the reason for this is, well, Dave and Shannon talked about this in one of their classes, but masculine FE in objective personality doesn't really exist in Myers-Briggs land. If they're masculine FE, they probably look more like TE. Because when you read about FE descriptions in MBTI, they talk about how FE is harmonious and accommodating to others. And that seems a lot more like feminine FE. But I think for both of the thinking functions, the sensing functions, it's definitely the masculine versions that appear more like the MBTI stereotype. Also think this holds true for NI as well. Now, where it's less clear is if it's FI or NE. So FI Now, masculine FI, I mean, I can see how that fits MBTI because if you're masculine FI, it's like, I have these values and I don't budge from them. Okay, that kind of fits MBTI stereotype. But then on the other hand, masculine FI, they may not appear as feeling like on the surface. That's kind of more feminine FI. They're a little more flowy with the feelings. But on the other hand, if your FI is feminine, that means your TE is masculine. So having masculine TE would kind of counteract the FI. So then they might appear more T like, and sometimes feminine FI too can be mistaken for FE because of its expressiveness. And sometimes I've read descriptions in MBTI where FI isn't so emotionally expressive. It is more contained, which would be consistent with more with masculine maybe. So I'm just going to assume for now that FI, if it's masculine, it's more MBTI typical and it scores points. NE is another interesting one. So if NE is masculine, they punch on the N more, the patterns. Sometimes it can look more like MBTI NI, and I've heard Dave and Shannon say that. But on the other hand, masculine NI means that SI is feminine. So it kind of just really looks like more disrespect of the sensing, just more forgetfulness, which is consistent with N. Okay, so that looks MBTI typical. Now, I have read NE descriptions, and some of that seems more like feminine NE, where it's just really kind of diffuse and scattered and anything goes and all the possibilities and not really shoving on them, just so that would be consistent with MBTI, but feminine NE has masculine SI as a demon. So then you get a little more shoving on the sensing, which kind of counteracts that. So I'm not sure with NE. That was kind of a wild card there. I'm just going to keep it simple though and say that masculine NE scores and feminine NE does not score. Yeah, so 2 points if the first function is masculine, and 1 point if that second function is masculine. And remember, we're talking about the first and second function in the function stack, not necessarily the savior function, because in MBTI, it's really those first two functions that kind of define the essence of that type. And the first function carrying the most weight, and then the second function being like a support to the first function. Okay, so let's do an example. I'm going to use my type here. So in MBTI, I'm an ISTJ. In objective personality, my full type is MF, SITE, blast, play, sleep, consume. So we'll run the scoring system with my type. So I get 3 points because I'm a standard version of ISTJ, the SITE version. My first function, SI, is double activated. It shows up in both the blast animal here and in the sleep animal. Remember that when we count function activation, the first 3 animals count. However, I don't get a point for having the SI in the top 2 animals. Okay, because my second animal is play. Play does not contain SI. So no score there. I get 2 points for having my second function double activated, which is TE. That's in both blast and play. I get 2 points for having my first function masculine. I have masculine SI. I don't get a point for having my second function masculine. My TE is feminine. Overall, I get 10 out of 12. So this is a pretty high score. So in general, I'm a pretty typical ISTJ MBTI wise. And I've discussed my type in multiple MBTI typology communities, and most of them would say, yeah, ISTJ. Now, on occasion, I've had people suggest different types for me. Um, for example, I had somebody think that I was an INFP, and that could be because, well, I have activated NE from play, and then also I have masculine FI. So they might see me as more FI like and maybe less TE like, more NE like. So INFP. I did have somebody suggest ISFJ, and because my TE is feminine, sometimes feminine TE can look like FE and MBTI because it's more accommodating, but overall, pretty typical for ISTJ. Now, on the spectrum of ISTJs in objective personality, which one is the most MBTI ISTJ like? That one would be the double masculine SITE blast, sleep, play, consume. So that one gets a perfect score, 12 out of 12. And we got an example here. Bear Pantry Talk, or Barbara for short. She's got a YouTube channel, does various product reviews. Yeah, just very typical ISTJ. The least ISTJ like would be double feminine, SIFI jumper, and it would have sleep, consume, play, blast. So this type would have the bottom two functions, NI and or excuse me, no, FI and NE double activated, and NI, or excuse me, FI and NE are both masculine. So this one scores a 0 out of 12 on this scale. It's just not going to look much like an MBTI ISTJ at all. It's probably going to get mistyped in MBTI land. Unfortunately, I don't have an example for this one, but I'm sure there's people out there that have that type. Okay, so let's look at ENFJs. Okay, so the function stack in ENFJ is FE, NI, SE, and TI. Okay, in objective personality, which one best fits the MBTI ENFJ? That one would be double feminine, FENI, blast, play, sleep, consume. Now remember that with FE, the feminine FE scores. Okay, not the masculine one, the feminine FE scores. Okay, that one is the exception to the rule. So this type here would have feminine FE, but it would also have masculine NI. Okay, because this first F here is for the sensing, so the sensing is feminine, which makes the intuition masculine. Okay, we got an example here. Barbara Corcoran, she's on Shark Tank, and they did a class on her. She is this type. Now, which one is the least ENFJ like? It would be the double masculine FESE jumper, play, consume, sleep, blast. Okay, and in this example, the bottom two functions, SC and TI, are double activated, and those two functions are masculine. So they're just not going to look very much like in ENFJ at all. They might look more like a ISTP, might type them upside down. Unfortunately, I don't know any examples of this type, but I'm sure there's people out there that have that type. Okay, and I feel obligated to do Dave and Shannon because their types are pretty interesting. So Dave is MF, NIFI, sleep, blast, play, consume. So he is a jumper version of INTJ. Okay, so he scores a 5 out of 12. So if you run through the scoring key here, he's getting 3 points for having his first function double activated, and he's getting 2 points for having his second function double activated. So his top two functions in the stack, NI and TE, both double activated, but they're both feminine. So he's not really shoving on them, even though he is using them quite a bit. So he's kind of in the middle of the scale. He's not the most typical version. He's not the least typical. Okay. And if we go over here to Shannon, so she's an ENTJ jumper. She is FMTESC, play, consume, sleep, blast, last. Now she only gets a 3 out of 12. So not exactly a super typical ENTJ. So here's Shannon. So she's just getting points for her modalities because she happens to have masculine TE and she has masculine NI. So that's where her points are coming from. All right. So if you run this chart through all of the 16 MBTI types, do the math. I've shown the most typical version in black and the least typical version in white. Okay, so you can kind of have fun with this chart if you want, see if you know any people that fit these types. I thought for the INFJ, it was kind of interesting. M is an example of this. MMNITI, sleep, consume, play, blast. And I've heard a lot of people say M doesn't seem like an INFJ at all. Why did David and Shannon type him as an INFJ? Well, he's not. He is, but he's not what we call the most typical in MBTI land. He'd probably get ISTP or something. So, and once again, this is just kind of for fun. It's not to be taken too seriously. This is just my own scoring version. I'd be interested in your feedback. How do you score on this? Do you think this should be scored differently? If so, let me know. Drop your comments. If you want to see more videos, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and ring the bell for notifications. I will also be sharing these slides in the video description, so feel free to download and share this with others. Have a great day. Bye-bye.